With a single instinctive reaction, the man senses that someone is approaching with lethal intent. Quickly scanning the room, he stuffs thick books under his shirt for protection and wraps his hands with socks to soften incoming blows. While searching for anything that could serve as a weapon, the attacker suddenly ambushes him from behind, using sheer size and force to slam him to the ground. Despite being caught off guard, his special forces training kicks in. He swiftly counters the assault, overpowering the intruder and eliminating the threat. Realizing he has been betrayed and that another assassin will likely follow, he immediately begins planning his escape. He drags the body into the main hall, creating a situation that will attract the guards. When the prison guards rush in, he seizes the moment and takes hostage the same guard who previously tormented him, restraining him and using him as leverage. Forcing the guard up toward a storage area on the roof, he knocks him unconscious and takes a moment to study the highest vantage points visible through the window. With the precision of a top-tier Special Forces operative, he calculates the perfect angle for a staged scenario. He drags a propane tank into position, sets up a convincing decoy scene, and waits. It doesn't take long before the tactical response team arrives. He swaps clothes with the unconscious guard, positions himself to appear as a hostage, and times everything exactly as planned. A sniper's bullet strikes the immobilized guard, rupturing the propane tank and causing a massive explosion. Hidden beneath the floorboards, the man narrowly survives the blast. Everyone assumes he has died. Everyone except one observant officer. She notices a distinctive tattoo and climbs into the ambulance carrying him. When she realizes he has regained consciousness, she discreetly places a firearm beside him without speaking, silently giving him a way out. Understanding her intention, he takes the opportunity to seize the police vehicle and escapes the scene. The officer watches him drive away with a conflicted expression. The man is Pete Koslow, a highly trained former Special Forces soldier with a stable family life, a loving wife, and a young daughter. Everything changed 5 years earlier when his family became involved in a violent confrontation with a group of criminals. In the chaos, Pete accidentally killed one of them while protecting his family and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. After 4 years behind bars, the FBI approached him with an offer. Infiltrate a major New York drug syndicate in exchange for a reduced sentence and early release. The target was a powerful Polish crime organization led by Ryszard the General Klimek. With the FBI secretly supporting him, Pete successfully embedded himself within the organization, quickly rising in rank and earning the trust of its leadership. A crucial moment arrives when a shipment of 6 kilograms of fentanyl is scheduled to arrive in New York under the general's orders. If Pete can help the FBI intercept it at the right moment, the authorities can catch the general directly connected to the product and end the undercover mission. To protect his family, Pete relocates his wife and daughter to a safe house, giving them strict instructions on what to do if he doesn't return by a specific hour. At the same time, his handler Erica spends the night preparing for the operation, briefing her superiors, and finalizing every strategic detail. Pete and Erica meet privately to coordinate the final steps. They decide he will wear a live wire transmitting all interactions in real time. These recordings will serve as evidence and also confirm his role as an undercover operative in case anything goes wrong. The next day, Pete accompanies the general's nephew, Staszek, to the airport to retrieve the shipment. To Pete's shock, the courier is a diplomat using immunity to freely transport illegal substances. Pete and Staszek redirect the shipment while undercover FBI agents monitor the situation from afar. Suddenly, the plan begins to unravel. Eager to impress his uncle, Staszek has already contacted a potential buyer, hoping to sell the entire shipment before it even reaches the general. If the product changes hands prematurely, the FBI will lose their only chance to catch the general with direct possession. Pete follows Staszek to a bar controlled by the gang, where they meet the buyer. The man claims to have served time in the same prison as Pete, but as the conversation continues, Pete grows suspicious. The buyer's behavior doesn't match his story, his background details are inconsistent, and he seems desperate to secure a massive purchase he clearly can't afford. Pete realizes the buyer is actually an undercover police officer. To avoid a disaster, Pete quietly warns him to leave before the gang figures out the truth. To sell the illusion, Pete abruptly flips their table to make it look like a genuine confrontation, but the plan collapses instantly when the undercover officer reveals his badge. Staszek returns at the worst possible moment and impulsively shoots the officer. Now the situation has escalated into a catastrophe. With a police officer dead, law enforcement will launch an intense search for those responsible, and it won't be long before Pete becomes a suspect. Pete uses a coded warning phrase to signal Erica for an extraction, but she is forced to abort the mission after hearing what happened over the wire. The surveillance teams withdraw, leaving Pete on his own. Unable to escape, he is forced to help Staszek deal with the aftermath and dispose of the evidence. Meanwhile, Erica's decision to pull out is purely strategic. Once the NYPD starts connecting the dots, the FBI's involvement, especially their reliance on a convicted inmate to facilitate a drug deal, could spark a massive scandal. Staszek brings Pete directly to the general's headquarters. The tension is overwhelming. The general is furious, knowing that an undercover officer's death could bring unprecedented attention to their operations and potentially destroy everything he has built. While Stasek was a member of the family and faced only minor symbolic consequences, Pete's situation was far more serious. Unlike Stasek, Pete had a traceable identity, and law enforcement would inevitably pursue him. Recognizing the risk, the general assigned Pete a new mission: return to prison. From within, he could extend the general's influence, transforming the facility into a central hub for distributing contraband to other institutions across New York. Pete resisted the idea. He had sacrificed so much to regain his freedom and wanted to avoid returning behind bars. Yet his wife and daughter were already under the general's protection, which forced his hand. Without viable alternatives, he returned home, seething with anger, and reached out to Erica for assistance. However, she preempted his call, criticizing him for the operation's failure and emphasizing the stakes of his situation. Facing direct threats to his family, Pete's frustration boiled over. He confronted his wife in panic, questioning why she hadn't evacuated when she had the chance. She explained through tears that she stayed out of concern for his safety, hoping he would return unharmed. With no other options, Pete arranged a meeting with Erica, this time including her superior. The meeting confirmed the Bureau's official stance. They would cut all ties. Now fully implicated in the death of a law enforcement officer, and with the contraband having passed through diplomatic channels, Pete's legal and personal position was precarious. Erica, however, proposed a high-risk alternative: allow him to proceed with the general's plan. By coordinating the controlled distribution of narcotics within the prison, the general could be permanently dismantled and Pete could secure his freedom. Pete faced impossible choices: cooperate and risk his life, refuse and be targeted by the mob, or remain in prison with no protection. With the FBI unwilling to formally acknowledge him as an informant if things went wrong, he quietly recorded every interaction with Erica as insurance. Meanwhile, the body of the undercover officer was discovered near a riverbank. Detective Edward Gren, responsible for the rookie, was devastated. His intention had been to provide field experience, but the operation escalated beyond control, and the young officer paid the ultimate price. Consumed with guilt, Gren analyzed surveillance footage near the gang's bar and noted Pete leaving the scene shortly after the incident. Digging further into his background, he discovered inconsistencies. Pete had been sentenced to 20 years but was released after only 4, with no clear documentation to explain the discrepancy. Back in Pete's reality, the inevitability of returning to prison was undeniable. With limited freedom remaining, he focused on safeguarding his family. On the eve of his incarceration, he laid out conditions for Erica. First, stage a controlled sweep of narcotics within the prison to allow him to operate discreetly. Second, assign him to maintenance and logistics duties to provide mobility and access. And third, she would covertly introduce the contraband into the facility. The first 2 conditions were acceptable, but the third was impossible. Frustrated and powerless, Pete left the meeting. Upon returning home, Pete found the general visiting with his wife, a traditional display meant to signify both honor and oversight. The presence of the mob leaders was a clear message: complete your sentence, remain silent, and your family will remain safe. The visit also confirmed Gren's suspicions. Pete was closely linked to the organization and the murdered officer. The following day, Pete and his wife staged a domestic dispute, resulting in his parole violation and immediate return to Bale Hill Prison. This unexpected arrest frustrated Gren, who now had to adjust his investigation without access to the key suspect. Gren confronted Erica and her superior, seeking clarity. The agents denied Pete's connection to the FBI, confirming that any covert operation had been entirely off the books. Gren presented his evidence, including surveillance showing Erica's vehicle near Pete at the bar immediately after the officer's death. Gren attempted to enlist Pete's wife, Sophia, to provide insight. Distrustful after being manipulated, she refused to cooperate, leaving Gren with no choice but to leave her a contact card. Within Bale Hill, Pete was processed into the prison system and deliberately placed in a wing dominated by the violent Black Gang. Despite this dangerous assignment, the general's influence ensured protection through bribery and strategic placement of loyal enforcers within the facility. The following day, the prison conducted a staged sweep of contraband as requested. Pete was reassigned to maintenance duties, granting him mobility and discretion. Outside the prison, the general's organization delivered narcotics to the facility via drones, concealing them within deceased pigeons. While performing rooftop maintenance, Pete discreetly retrieved the parcels. With the Black Gang temporarily cut off from their usual supply due to the sweep, Pete seized the opportunity to distribute the contraband internally by passing the corrupt guards. This move angered the rival gangs. Detective Gren, desperate to advance his investigation, attempted to manipulate the rival groups to draw Pete into a trap and extract critical information about the ongoing operations. That night, Officer Slew dragged him into the chapel and struck him with a baton, punishing him for defying the prison hierarchy. Bloodied and restrained, Pete was left in a precarious situation with instructions to make his death appear self-inflicted. Despite the threat, Pete was not ready to give up. Under extreme pressure, he revealed his true identity, his undercover mission, and his role as an informant working to dismantle the general's organization. The inmate known as Smiley took note. Recognizing the potential advantage, Smiley agreed to form a discreet alliance with Pete, helping him obtain the prison's drug distribution records. These records would serve as concrete evidence to take down the general's operation. Outside the prison, the FBI prepared to cut ties with Pete entirely. Detective Gren demanded answers, but Pete's informant status had never been officially documented. Agent Montgomery, intent on protecting his career, ordered Erica to abandon Pete and conceal the operation, shifting all responsibility onto her. Inside the prison, Pete managed to secure the distribution list. During a routine handshake with the warden, he covertly passed the documents while requesting a transfer to solitary for protection. The warden, briefed to ignore his plea, left him exposed. Recognizing the danger to himself and his family, Pete attempted to reach Erica one final time, but received no response. He then contacted his wife, Sophia, explaining the imminent threat. She acted quickly, retrieving hidden audio recordings of Pete's interactions with Erica, the last leverage he had to protect himself. Meanwhile, Erica, having already tapped Sophia's phone, trails her to the storage unit and seizes the hidden tape recordings. When she listens to the audio, hearing her own voice promising Pete she would keep his wife and daughter safe, she sits in silence, overwhelmed by guilt and conflict. Meanwhile, the general's crew issued a contract to eliminate Pete. Using his training, Pete neutralized the immediate threat but knew his survival required escape. He orchestrated a careful prison break, taking a guard hostage to facilitate his plan. Montgomery, seeking his elimination, remained a constant threat. At the same time, Pete's wife and daughter faced a dire situation at home. Stashik and another gang member forced entry, threatening to destroy the house with gasoline. Sophia managed to call Gren just in time. Amid the chaos, Stashik used Pete's daughter as a human shield and shot Gren. Sophia freed herself, picked up a weapon, and the confrontation ended with Gren neutralizing the attacker. Both wife and daughter survived. Back at the prison, Montgomery ordered a sniper to take out Pete. An explosion was triggered as planned, and Erica arrived at the scene. Shortly after observing closely, she noticed a familiar tattoo on a survivor's arm and realized it was Pete. Guilt over broken promises compelled her to secretly provide him with a firearm. Pete immediately understood, used it to create a diversion, and escaped. Days later, Erica set a trap for Montgomery by dropping false information about Pete's location. Montgomery, trying to cover his tracks, exposed his plans, but Erica's wire allowed federal agents to intervene and arrest him. Weeks later, Pete, now a fugitive, arranged a meeting with his wife in a city park. Noticing Erica and a heavy FBI presence, he suspected a trap and began to leave. At that moment, Gren intercepted him, handing over a passport and new identity. He instructed Pete to lay low while the investigation into the corrupt prison operations proceeded. Pete watched from a distance as his wife and daughter safely disappeared into the crowd, finally secure. Like and subscribe for more recaps like this.